Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the Markfield Institute's podcast series. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Professor John Esposito. Just a brief introduction before we start our discussion. Professor was born in 1940 and is an American academic and a professor of Middle Eastern studies and religious studies, and a scholar of Islamic studies, and he serves as a professor of religion, international affairs, and Islamic studies at Georgetown University in Washington. He is also a founding director of the Prince Al-Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown. Welcome, Professor John Esposito. We are really grateful that you've come all the way from America to talk to us. And we had a gathering today in the memory of Professor Khurshid Ahmed, who is a person you have worked closely with over the last 20, 30 years. So it'll be good to share your thoughts about that. So my first question is about yourself, is that what got you into studying Islam academically?
Well, I never really intended to study academically Islam. I went to graduate school initially. I was a young Catholic theologian, and I was going to the Temple University to do a PhD in which I would major in Catholic studies. But it was suggested that I take a course on Islam. I was reluctant because I wanted to finish my degree as fast as I could, but I took the course, and what really, I think, made it happen was my professor, Ismail Al-Faruqi, and his wife, Lamia Al-Faruqi. But also in my class, almost the majority of the class were from the Muslim world, which was very unique. And so I not only, therefore, engaged Islam intellectually, but I also engaged it in a living context all the time. And eventually I became fascinated with Islam, and I moved on to Islamic studies.
So you learned Islam in a university context,
yes,
but with the majority of Muslim students. So
that's right.
You could understand their experiences and other things.
That's right.
That's excellent. Yeah, thank you for that. How has the study of Islam over the years changed you since you started and up till now?
Well, it's changed enormously. That is, that you now have, for now a number of decades, departments of religion that have Islamist taught. You have programs where people can do a master's degree or a PhD. So it's very visible in our society educationally, and increasingly we have Muslims, many of them, who are now professors. In university. So, for example, a number of years ago, the 3 finalists for a position were all Muslim, and we hired Jonathan Brown, who's a prominent scholar of Islam.
Okay. Over the years, maybe majority of books at mainstream universities, especially in Western countries, may have been from Orientalists' perspectives. So when you started to study Islam, was it mainly the Orientalist books, or you were reading books by modern and classical Islamic scholars as well?
Well, I think there were 2 things. One, you had to know, because on certain areas, the books were by Orientalists, and some of the Orientalists were quite good, and in others were not. But part of the program, certainly studying with Faruqi, with Ismail, I was exposed to Muslim sources, and there was an obvious emphasis on whether we were talking about Islam, we were talking about women in Islam. His wife was an expert in that area also. And my colleagues, the vast majority in the class were Muslims, and in many ways I was learning a lot from them in terms of contemporary Muslim attitudes.
Over the years, Islam was not seen as a threat, so maybe not much was written of Islam in a negative way, but over the last 10, 15 years, it's being seen more and more of a threat. What has been your contribution to engage with those debates?
Yeah, well, when I first got into the field, we had Muslims, but they were identified nationally. And Islam was not taught in most universities. Books weren't published. But then the Iranian Revolution changed things. Yes, Islam was seen in terms of the revolution, but there was a broader interest in Islam. And therefore, whereas before you couldn't get book contracts to write books, then there were the opportunity to write books, and the area grew, and so then it made for the development of knowledge about Islam in a broader way in the educational system. And where I could see that change was that at a certain point, I would have students come, for example, to Georgetown, and it was clear that in high school, they had either had a course in which Islam was covered, whereas before that would have never, been the case.
What has been your main topics in the study of Islam about which you've studied but also written about? Some of your key books?
Yeah, some of my key books were Islam, the Straight Path, which went through 7 editions and translated into many languages. What Everyone Needs to Know About Islam, What Everyone Needs to Know About Sharia, The Islamic Threat, Myth or Reality, Unholy War, Terror in the Name of Islam, a number of those books, and also the Oxford Encyclopedia of the Modern Islamic World.
Very interesting topics and titles of books. Today you are here at the first memorial lecture on Professor Khurshid Ahmed. So we just want to know something. How did you know Professor Khurshid Ahmed and then started to work with him over the years?
In 1973, I had an opportunity to join with a group of American academics who went to Pakistan. It was there that I got to, among other things, be exposed to the Jamaat-e Islami. And then subsequent to that period, I met with Khurshid, and we very often saw each other either when I went to Pakistan or at some conferences in other places, or when he would be in America. And also, I came here shortly after Markfield was established, and came here several times. So I knew Khurshid over a period of time, and I had known his younger brother, Anis, from graduate school.
Okay. Coming back to yourself, and there are a lot of sort of interest over the last 10 on political Islam. We just want to know, your understanding of what does political Islam mean, and how has the debates on political Islam changed over the last few decades?
Now, if you talk about political Islam, whether you're going to give a lecture or whether people are interested in a book, a dimension of political Islam is the use of religion, for example, in terms of what happened in the Iranian Revolution, or in terms of 9/11. But political Islam also, and I spent a major time writing books, including a book that talked about contemporary voices and that included Khurshid. And their political Islam were movements, global movements in the Muslim world, with very often Islamic organizations that dealt with issues of political, social, religious, and economic interpretations of Islam, and the extent to which Islam contributed to an understanding in these areas. And so we were involved with the center in running major conferences that would bring together these Muslim scholars, and then we would publish books like, Voices of Islam, and a variety of other kinds of books.
This term which is used, Islamists, to differentiate them from ordinary Muslims. So how was this term coined, and who is it really referred to?
Islamist is, well, depends on who uses it. For some, Islamist is a negative term, and therefore would mean an attitude that would say the religion is backwards or it's dangerous or whatever. But Islamist, on the other hand, I would very often use the phrase Islamic activist. These were, a vast number of Muslims across the world and organizations that were, if you will, modern educated as well as Islamically educated, and dealt with issues of religion, politics, and society. That is, the role that religion could or should be lived not only in a person's individual life, but in their everyday life and their political life. It's not the same as, but you had similar movements in Catholic liberation theology, for example. And so I think that one needs to distinguish between that term. The problem when you use the term is that when some people use it, they're using it with regard to extremist or an extremist religion, etc. But in fact, for me, there's also the broader dimension of talking about Islamic movements that functioned within mainstream society and at times were seen as a threat by some governments, obviously, the authoritarian governments.
Since 9/11, all these terms, fundamentalist and Islamist and so on, they have emerged and there's new definitions. So we just want to know from your work that after 9/11, how did that impact Western understanding of Islam? And are we still, feeling the mischaracterization of Islam?
Well, it's interesting. When 9/11 occurred, the chair of the Center's Advisory Council, which were outside scholars, the chair said this will put us back 20 years. And he was a Palestinian American who taught at Oxford, and then it was at Harvard. And I thought, he's exaggerating, 10 years. The fact is, it's 30, 40 years later. Mm-hmm. And we're still dealing with the fallout from the impact of 9/11 and the extent to which it reinforced an attitude that Islam was a particularly militant religion. And you see that, for example, in the politics of Europe today, in France, across Austria. You see it certainly in the UK, in which Islamophobia is so common. Rather than disappearing, we've seen a globalization of Islamophobia. And in fact, one of my most recent books was co-authored with someone on the globalization of Islamophobia. So in a way, things have not gotten better, but are getting worse. And it occurs in a world in which you have the continuation of authoritarianism in many Muslim countries that could be playing a more constructive role, and in a world in which many Western countries have significant Islamophobia, including in their governments. So if you look, for example, in particular, the administration under several presidents, and you see it more recently, I think, in the war in Gaza, in what's happening in Lebanon, and in how it's being portrayed by the Israelis and often by American sectors, in a totally negative way, and the recent attacks in Iran and the bombings in Lebanon.
You mentioned Islamophobia, and here in the UK, and I'm sure in America and Canada and Western world, the far right, parties, they have made this as an issue. and they are really, the rise of Islamophobia is because of this, and there is a lot of popular support for it, and Muslims are painted as an enemy from within. What can we do to reduce or eliminate Islamophobia?
It's a real challenge. When I saw that things were not disappearing, for example, after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and the Soviets being driven out of Afghanistan, I met with a senior member of the American government who basically, the question was, the global threat disappeared. Would there be a new global threat? And so, and I deliberately wrote a book, called The Islamic Threat, Myth or Reality. In fact, we've seen a globalization of Islamophobia. And one can do as much as one can do. So you can hold conferences, you can write books, you can do podcasts. But the fact is that in many countries, right across Europe, you go from the United States across Europe through Asia, etc. You see globalization, whether it's the impact on the Rohingya, as well as Muslim communities in Europe and Muslims in North America. What it really takes is a concerted effort of diverse sectors of society. People of faith and no faith, scholars, mobilizing citizens, and particularly trying to influence the next generations, the younger generation.
Just finally, we are here on this campus where you are sitting. We have the Islamic Foundation, Q Publishing, and we have the Markfield Institute. In the Markfield Institute, we have been teaching Islam at a higher education level, but mainly focusing on the application of Islam and mental well-being, pastoral care, Islamic economics, finance, Islam and education, Islam and sustainable development, and also Islamic studies. Would you offer any advice for our institution about the sort of subject areas, curriculum development, what are the areas we need to focus on, not only to teach, but also for research, which would help to address Islamophobia and the problems Muslims are facing in the West?
That's difficult for me because I don't know the programs that you have now. I would say that one of the things that, you might want to think about, and this would be the kind of thing that Khurshid, himself, would be about, is to create situations where you, for example, bring together some experts in the field to either do a program that's something you could have that's open to a broader audience, but you could also have something where it's where you're interfacing with people who can see what you're doing and make recommendations on how to enhance, what you're doing in ways not only informational, but perhaps in ways in which one can attract even broader and diverse type audiences.
Professor John Esposito, many, many thanks for coming here and taking part in the gathering which we've just had, a memorial on Professor Khurshid Ahmed, and also taking part in this podcast. And, some of your books are like compulsory reading on our curriculum, and we have benefited a lot from your thought, and we continue to have this interaction with you so that we can benefit from your thinking.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.